story cabin. Now, our story today is based in Ireland and it's called Seamus and the Fairy Trees. To start our story, you need to know what a fairy tree is. A fairy tree is a tree where all of the bark is missing. They normally lie flat on the ground, not standing up, and they have hundreds of holes in them. And people believe it's where fairies live. And they also believe it's incredibly bad luck to mess about with a fairy tree. And it makes you wonder why people think that. And I believe this story might be at least part of the reason why. Once, quite some time ago now, there lived in a village in a country called Ireland a man called Seamus O'Finnigan Finnegan. I don't know why he had two surnames, he just did. Now, Seamus O'Finnigan Finnegan was very tall indeed, and Seamus O'Finnigan Finnegan was very slim. Seamus O'Finnigan Finnegan had 2 big feet, and Seamus O'Finnigan Finnegan liked nothing more than to dance. And to tell you the truth, Seamus O'Finnigan Finnegan wasn't the brightest person in his village. In fact, if he was alone in the house, he was barely the brightest person in the house. Now, on the day of our story, Seamus awoke and decided that he was going to go and find out what all the fuss was about fairy trees. There was one about an hour's walk from his village where he lived. Now, this was to be the day of the big village fair that everybody went to, but it wasn't starting until later in the afternoon. And Seamus thought, that's fine. I've got plenty of time. I can walk to the fairy tree. I can find out what all the fuss is about. Find out if fairies really live there, and then get back in time for the fair. That will be grand. So he took his walking stick and he made himself a lovely cheese sandwich, because it was an hour's walk there and an hour's walk back, and he thought, I might get hungry. And he put the cheese sandwich in his pocket and headed off. He walked for an hour until he came to a clearing on the edge of a wood where the fairy tree lay. And he stood and he looked at the fairy tree and he thought, now, how am I going to find out if there are any fairies in this fairy tree? Oh, I know. He looked down at the tree and he said, wakey, wakey, rise and shine, any fairies in there? Do you think any fairies came out? No, not a one. So Seamus thought, what else can I do? Oh, he thought, he took his stick and he went up, he got close to the tree, he picked up his stick and he began to beat on the side of the fairy tree. Rat-tat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat, rat-tat, rat-tat, rat-tat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat. And then he called out again, wakey, wakey, rise and shine, any fairies in there? Do you think any fairies came out? No, not a one. Seamus scratched his head and thought, what on earth am I going to do? Oh, he thought, I know. He got down close to the fairy tree and he thought to himself, there are lots of little holes in the tree. So maybe if I blow really hard in one of the holes, maybe a fairy will come shooting out of a different hole. So he got down, right close down to the tree. He put his hands together like this to form a kind of straw. He took a deep breath and he blew. He blew. He blew. Do you think any fairies came out? No, not a one. Well, Seamus thought, well, that's it. He even said aloud, that's it. No fairies live in this fairy tree. Ugh. But he said to himself, you know what? After all this walking and all this yelling and all this beating with the stick and all this blowing, I am a little weary. So he sat himself down with his back against the fairy tree. And he had a little snooze. Now, Seamus only meant to sleep for 5 or 10 minutes, but in fact he slept on for quite a few hours. He only awoke when the sun started going down, and it began to get chilly. He woke up, looked up and thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to miss the village fair. And also, I'm really hungry. So he took his cheese sandwich out of his pocket and he took an enormous bite. Crunch! Whilst Seamus had been asleep, someone had changed his cheese sandwich into stone. And now when he bit on it, it really hurt his teeth. Seamus thought, I'd better go back to the village and get somebody to look at my teeth. He stood up and went to go striding off, but rather than taking a step forward, instead he went, and fell over, flat on his face, and squashed his nose sideways like that. So now all his teeth were hurting on this side, and his nose was squashed sideways like that. He looked down. Whilst he'd been asleep, someone had tied his shoelaces together. He untied his shoelaces and tied them back up on the proper way round and went striding off back to the village as fast as he could go. When he got back to the village, the fair was in full flow. He went to the little fountain with the steps all around it in the middle of the village, climbed up onto the top step and called out, "Can somebody help me, please?" Every head turned to look at him, and as the last villager looked round at Seamus O'Finnigan, ping! The button went flying off the front of his trousers, and his trousers fell down. Seamus pulled his trousers back up and went running back to his house as fast as he could go. He went to bed that night with his teeth still hurting and his nose still wonky, of all the embarrassment of having had his trousers fall down in front of everybody right at the forefront of his mind. But despite all of that, he managed to get to sleep. When he woke up in the morning, he looked down the length of his bed at his feet and thought, that's strange. And just carried on getting ready for the day. He went into the bathroom and he had a wash, and while he was washing, he looked down at his feet and he thought, is there something wrong? And it was only once he was washed and dressed and gone downstairs to put his boots on that he realised what was wrong. Whilst he'd been asleep, someone had swapped his feet over. So now his left foot was on his right leg and his right foot was on his left leg. And every time he tried to take a step forward, his legs would take him off in all kinds of odd directions. Seamus sat down at the kitchen table and thought to himself, now who could have turned my cheese sandwich to stone, tied my shoelaces together, made the button fly off the front of my trousers, and have put my feet on the wrong legs? After a few seconds' thought, the answer came to him. It must be fairies. Oh no, he thought, oh no, what am I going to do? Wait, I know. He went and he got a fine cotton tablecloth and a lovely loaf of bread, a pat of butter and the finest jar of honey he could find. And putting them all carefully into a bag, he walked off to go and visit the fairy tree again. Although, to tell you the truth, it took him twice as long as usual because his feet kept going off in odd directions. After all, they were on the wrong legs. When he got there, he laid out the tablecloth, put out the loaf of bread, the pat of butter and the honey, knelt down next to the fairy tree and whispered, "I'm very, very sorry," and then crept away. Now, I'm pleased to tell you that from that day on, Seamus had no more trouble with fairies, although his feet stayed on the wrong legs. And word of his misfortune and what had happened when he had disturbed a fairy tree spread far and wide throughout Ireland. Which is why I think to this day people are wary of fairy trees. Oh, and just one last thing. As far as I know, Seamus O'Finnigan Finnegan is still living in that village. So if you find yourself in a small village in Ireland and a tall, slim man with the wrong feet on each leg gets up to dance, make sure you get out of the way, because there's no telling where his feet are going to go. And that, my friends, is the story of Seamus and the fairy trees. Thank you so much for joining us here in Storybeard Story Cabin. We'll be back for more stories another day. Take care now.